to Kufi Beis Halacha Ches. Yesh Vish Omer. There are those who say the Makar She'en Paltar Motzer Klau. If there's no paltar, meaning there's no pas Yisroel, and there's not even pas paltar shalakum, then mutar afil shabal batim, you could even eat pas Bal HaBayis. And there are most sticks in vein tzarich lahamtin al pas kosher. You don't even have to wait in case the pas kosher is coming. You don't have to wait for it. And it's complete. It's mutar v'cheinoig, and that's the minute to be makel even like that. Okay, so this din is saying we've been learning all that pas paltar is mutter in certain cases. Now we have a person who doesn't even have pas paltar. The only thing he has to eat is pas Bal HaBayis. So the Shulchan Aruch says you could be makel about that, or yeshar that you could make about that. And the Bishul brings two sort of makaris to that din. And the main one is from a Maril, that the Maril says like this. The Gemara says in Chulin, we're going to have this later in Halacha Yudalad, that if a person has a taruvis of pas akum, okay, pas akum mixed with other things and it's mutter, and the reason, how do we know? Because just like by demai, which is also nisid rabbanan, if you have a taruvis of demai, you're allowed to eat it, you're allowed to eat the food, so too, you're allowed to eat a taruvis of pas akum. Okay, so you see from that Gemara that the isser of pas akum is less chomer than the isser of demai. And
so the Gemara says that?
That's
what's the taruvis?
Right. The Gemara says taruvis of pas akum of.
The Gemara selling to the Talmud or the
Yes. No. The Gemara sells pas akum to the Mai. Now, there's another thing about the Mai, which is that the Mai, you're allowed to feed the Mai taniyim, or to someone who's traveling, who's basically a temporary ani. You're allowed to give that person the Mai. That's a Mishnah. You're allowed to give that person the Mai. I mean, it's Rabbanan. You're allowed to give it to what?
You don't have to give it. Doesn't mean you're allowed to eat it.
What do you think he's allowed to? What do you think he's allowed to?
There's an issue to give an amaretz, chaver to give an amaretz to my right.
Okay.
That's a shon. That's the mission, right?
Yes.
He don't. If the only is an amaretz, you have to give him the mai without being mafresh before you give it to him. Does not mean that the only is allowed to eat it.
Say you sure?
That's it.
The mission says ma'achilin.
Right, ma'achilin.
Did you feed it to them?
Look at the Bal HaBayis over there.
Okay.
The honey in Yafresh.
In Yirtzi, but not that it. But what did you?
I know Shine about.
Okay, fine. I didn't know that. Okay. Everyone's assuming. The Maril's assuming.
Yeah, but all the Gemara is right. The Mai in the case of not case of the one after the Shlesh all over the place, right? The Mai is right. That's all the schools, right?
Okay. So they're assuming that
either boy mafkir.
Okay. Assuming he can eat it.
That's
so
it.
therefore, so now the Maril says if pas akum is more kal than demai is, because we see that pas akum, the Gemara is assuming pas akum is like demai, and by demai you can give it to a poor person. So therefore, you could also give pas akum to a, so to speak, poor person. The person has nothing to eat. The Mishnah says you give it to a poor person or a temporary poor person. The person who's traveling, who has no money with him, so he's a temporary poor person, you let to give it to him. So the Maharal says, so if I have a place that has no bread, okay, there's no pas Yisroel, there's no pas paltar. The only thing that's really available is pas akum, pas Bal HaBayis, which is pas akum. So you're allowed to give it to me. Okay, I'm allowed to eat it. I'm allowed to eat it myself. Okay, which is not exactly what the case over there is. You know, machil lanim demai is not exactly the case. But the point that he's trying to make is the point that he's trying to say, which is the other shita means is a ra'ah, from being brought in the Orchos Chaim. There's such a shita who doesn't explain why. He just says, yeah, you're allowed to do it. It doesn't say what. The pshat is that the person we see from the din of by demai that you can give it to the poor person, that in the time of a tchak, the chacham waived their isser. They had made up an isser and they waived it in time of a tchak. So since they waived their isser when there's a tchak, a certain isser davon get waived when there's a difficult situation. So just like giving the aniyim, you're allowed to give them demai, you're allowed to give the aniyim a pas akum, and you're allowed to give yourself pas akum if you live in a place where there's no pas at all. Okay, that's considered in the same thing. Okay, you could ask lots of questions. It's not an exact dim in these cases. Okay, but then I'm going to take it even one step further, which is the reason that the Maharal is saying, the mission that he's bringing is not talking about a guy who's starving. Okay? That's not, the point here is not that the guy's starving. It's that, what's the point? You have an ani, and you want to feed him demai. Why are you feeding the ani demai? What's the point of this feeding him demai? It means is that Tzibur has $10 or 10 pounds of food to give the guy. if we have to be mafresh shumas meises, we have to spend some of our money on to be mafresh shumas meises, there's less for the aniyim to go around. So it's because it's to sort of stretch the money that we have for tzedakah is that we can give the ani from the demai. We're getting a little bit extra out of our money if we give him demai instead of giving him food that had shumas meises, unless like David said that he has to be mafresh. So assuming that you mamish give him the guy the stuff, so you're stretching the money a little bit more. So it's not because the guy's starving. He'll have what to eat. He'll just have less to eat. The point is, but in the chak of the ani has so little to start with, giving him this will give him a little bit more. So that kind of a chak is mutter. And I say it because the Shulchan Aruch and all these places come talking about cases where the guy has nothing to eat. There's just like no bread in town besides that. So it's considered important enough. He can eat potatoes, but he has no bread to eat. Because the Chelkas B'yam brings from other places that what happens if there's a different kind of a chak. His case is that what happens if a guy is invited by somebody important, and the only food that the guy, if he doesn't eat, if you don't eat his pas paltar, his pas akum, then he's going to get all insulted and hurt you, or who knows what he's going to do. Okay, so there's a pressure for you to eat the food, so he brings from there who people say that you're allowed to eat it. Now, you're in a city with this pas yisrael, there's pas paltar, there's things to eat. But there's a different doichak, not the doichak here of the person who's starving, but you're allowed to eat it also. And the reason why it should be mutter is because the raya came from a case where it's not a guy starving. When you give the ani demai, he's not starving. The point is just that it's easier. It makes it easier for us to give him, and he has a little bit more to eat. So in that kind of a chak, we said you can give him demai, or you can give him pas palta, pas akum. So they're extending it to a different kind of a chak. The point is that you don't have to be starving. Even though their case doesn't have to be starving, you don't have to be starving in order to eat it. You can eat pas Bal HaBayis, even if it's just a doichak. And so they came up with a different case of a doichak.
So the dochak is not the ani being hungry.
Well,
it's we're trying to stretch our money.
Well, tell me, the ani, we have a pound of apples to give to the ani, okay? And it's demai. So if we give it to him, if we say, no, you can't give him demai, so you still have the pound of apples, you just be mafresh shumas meises and then give it to him. So the difference is just that he'll have more if you give it to him. We have the food in front of us. So he's not going to, he'll have less to eat. So for an ani, he has not so much to eat in the first place, so giving him a little less, that's considered a dochak. Okay? For you in your house, you have to be mafresh shumas meises. For the ani, giving him a little bit less, that's enough of a dochak to give him demai. Well, what's pshat? Why are you giving him demai? Why don't you just be mafresh shumas meises? Well, so it's not because he's going to starve, but he's going to have less. Less, when you have very little and you have less, then you have very little. They have even less, whatever you want to call it. That's what I'm saying. That's where they're getting it from, that you say that it's not the pshat that you have to be starving to get it. It's because if you could just be mafresh shumas meises and give it to the ani, so it's not like he can't eat.
So 1% less.
What do you say?
So more than 1% less.
Right, it's a tiny amount. So it's
too much nice. That's all.
So it's a tiny amount. The difference. So the point is, for that tiny difference, it's for the ani. When a guy has so little, a little bit makes a difference also. Okay, so for that, Chazal were willing to do it.
That's still in the gara of an ani food. The guy invites an important person's house. It's not like he's going to be starving. It's not like it's the same type of a docha. It's not the same.
It's a side docha.
It's a different kind of docha. Right. I'm not saying that right now. It's different. The point is that you don't have to be. What the Maril is not saying that if you have to be starving to get it. Like we had a Yushalmi that if for 3 days you haven't eaten, you can eat pasakum. Okay, he's not saying you have to be not eating for 3 days because his case happens to be something like that. But his raya is from a case of a guy who doesn't have anywhere near that docha. He's going to have a tiny bit less food to eat. But when you're an ani and you have a tiny bit less, that's too big. That's crucial.
So then it changes. It changes everything. It changes.
So, but it shows you that you don't have to be. It's not like much like the guy's on his deathbed. It's an ani. So that's just we want to be. Okay, fine. Now, the Ramah makes a statement here. Ain't tzarich lahamten al pas kosher. Because the Ramah makes a little line here. Meaning, if you know that you're going to have pas yisrael available, pas paltar even available, or you're going to go to the town and in a while you don't have to get it. That thing that the Ramah says is not as pashut as it sounds like over there. Is that why don't you have to wait? We're telling you're allowed to be over an Issa Drabanan over here. So why don't you have to wait? It's going to come up the last din in the Simon. It's in Halacha Tezayin. We'll talk about it over there. That's where it comes up again. What this din the Ramah said is not so pashut. It's a little bit. You on your own, you realize it's a little not so simple to understand. We're telling the guy you could over an Issa Drabanan when if you wait an hour you'd be able to not be over the Issa. We'll get to Mitzvah and we'll do it in Tezayin, which I told you in Halacha Dalus. Okay, fine. Now, I'm going to use this now as a chance. If you remember, I told you the first 8 halachas are about pas paltar. basically, about the kula pas palter. So this is the last of the dinim, basically, of pas palter. So I'm going to talk about a thing that's related to the general rule of thing of pas palter, which is the Birkei Yosef in the Siman brings a pretty well-known Maharit Tzahalon, who says that what does it help that we say that pas palter is mutter? He says, you say, okay, so there's no isser pas akum when the food is pas palter. He says, so why isn't the food bishul akum? Okay, so it's not pas akum, fine. But why shouldn't there just be bishul akum also? Okay, so he answers, he says, that proves the fact that you're allowed to eat it proves that the heter of palter applies to bishul akum also. Not only does the heter of palter apply to pas, which is what we've seen, the last 8 dinim is all about that, but it even applies to bishul akum also. And he says, not only does it make sense that it should apply to bishul akum, he says it even makes more sense that it applies to bishul akum. He says those people who are questioned whether the heter pas palter, whether the heter pas palter, we saw at the beginning, not everybody agrees to such a kula. He says everyone will agree to the heter bishul palter, because pas palter, there's a certain chashivas to bread. So even coming from a palter, there's a possibility of chasnus. Even though it's the guy, you really don't know the guy, but it's such a chosh of a thing you're getting from him, there's a chash of chasnus. But by bishul, it's not such a chosh of a food. So there, everyone will agree that if it's coming from a palter, so you don't have no connection to this baker, everyone will agree that there's a heter of bishul palter is mutter. Okay? Which, now of course, and he says, he's using it to explain, in his days, there was a cool, people ate certain kinds of beans that he said were oil shulchan lachem, and they used to buy them from the goyim and eat them. And he said the reason is because it's bishul palter, and bishul palter is mutter. He said that's what people used to do with it. Okay, now, we would answer his kasha. We would not have even started with the kasha at all. Okay, we would just say is when let's say the Yerushalmi was makel, the Gemara, the Bible, he said that they took back the Isser. It's understood that pas is so important that they took off the Isser pas palter, and if there's an Isser bishul, they took that off also. Not that it's all for everything. For that food, pas is so important to eat that the Isser of whatever Isurim of chasnas that are on that food were taken off because it's so important to have bread, and because it's not just a chash of chasnas. Okay, but he's saying for the fact that you're allowed to eat, it shows you that all bishul is mutter.
So why was there a difference? Why did they make something called pas palter, or pas akum and bishul akum?
Why were they made separately?
It's all the same.
That's a separate, it's like a sort of a side question, which is, I need to push it away. Is that there's a shiloh where which one was first. One of them might have been first, the other one separate.
But according to him, if the same law is applied, the same material, is there any difference between
well,
I
don't know that he holds that the kul of what's it, Olo Shulchan Lachem and Nechel Chai applies.
For sure, not Nechel Chai.
Seemingly right, and it's Olo Shulchan Lachem. So you're saying that it really does not negate that child,
right?
Okay, it's a question why there are two gzeros and whether they or how they overlap on each other. Okay, that kasha is a shiloh we talked about once about for the Torah has his own shita, but how the two did them, why they're separate from each other. Okay, put that on the side.
For the word chashuv, you're saying important, really maybe not a good translation, more like
what's
a
better
staple. No? It's not so much like it's important, it's a chashuv of food.
He doesn't say
it's a staple.
he doesn't say in that sense of a staple. Maybe you might be right. That's what he means.
That's what
He's saying the staple is the reason why
No, I'm
we're
confused. He's saying that the bishul is not so chashuv.
No, he's saying is that if I give you something of significance,
Right.
so then you feel a connection to me.
Correct.
So if I give for bishul food, let's say a potato, if I give you, you'll feel closest to me if I give it to you. But if you buy it from the store, you won't feel that. For a for bread, which is more chashuv, you'll feel a closeness even getting it from the baker. You'll feel close to the lady behind the counter at North Shore.
You're giving an example of potato, but they could have very, very chashuv of food. More chashuv would be for bishul.
You would think so, but a piece of meat. If I gave you a piece of meat, you think that would be more chashuv. So you're saying that what he means is it's such a staple food that therefore I feel extra important because it's sort of my baseline requirement. Okay, maybe that could be the truth. Okay, now the Birkei Yosef brings this. He doesn't buy it. Okay? He argues on it completely, and his simple reason to argue on it is that if you open up your Shulchan Aruch, you'll see that in Kuf Yud we just had 8 dinim about pas palter, and if you open up Kuf Yud Gimel, which is the Aruch bishul akum, there's not a word about it. Okay, so who are we kidding? How can you tell me that not only is it mutter, but everyone agrees to it when you turn to Simon Kuf Yud Gimel, there's not a word about such thing. No one ever heard of a kula of Bishul Paltar in Kuf Yud Gimel. It's all, we have half of Kuf Yud is about that, but not a word in Kufay Gimel about Bishul Paltar. Okay? So he just disagrees with it, and as you know, it's well accepted that not to follow the Shita. We'll talk a little bit more in a second about it. Okay? There's a riot, there happens to be this, it seems, of the Farish riot against the Maharit Tzahalon from Kufay Gimel. The Beit Yosef just makes it as like, how could you say, where's everyone to talk of? How come no one's mentioning that in Kufay Gimel? In the Halacha Gimel, and Kufay Gimel says, it's talking about a case that you bake bread and had shuman, oil, together with it. Okay? And the shaila is that the bread and the bread is within the rules of Pas Hakum, and the oil, the shuman, is in the rules of Bishul Hakum. Okay? So the Mechaber says, even if you're making about Pas Hakum, this bread will be asur because the oil, the shuman gets mixed into it. The oil gets mixed into it. Okay? It's not again what the din he's trying to say is. But we're talking. So what is he talking about? He says that even if you're making about Pas Hakum, what does it mean? Who's making about Pas Hakum? Means is even if you hold that Pas Paltar is mutter, that's what he's trying to say. Even if you say so, this bread would be mutter inherently. The bread would be mutter because it was baked by Paltar. But that's what's going on. Still, there's an isser because the other thing that's there gets into it and causes it to become asur. Okay? Well, the other thing is being baked by the same person. They're being baked together. So that other thing is also being baked by a Paltar. So that thing, so he's saying there's Bishul Akum on the food being made by a Paltar. He's saying, if you're cooking a bread and another thing at the same time, even if the bread is mutter, what do you mean? And I'm sticking in words. Because it's Pas Paltar. Why would he says even if you hold bread is mutter? What does that mean?
Making a knish, right? The dough might be pas, and then
right. So he's saying even if you hold that even if you hold pas is mutter, I'm adding words in because it's Pas Paltar and it's being baked in the back of a bakery someplace. Even so, it's also because of the other ingredient that's there. Well, the other ingredient is also being baked by the Paltar. It's the same guy baking both foods. So that food. So he's saying that Bishul Paltar is also. Okay? We're in that it's negated to the bread, but he's saying that Bishul Paltar is also. And everyone assumes that that's also. Now. So we would have, if we would just hear this on our own, as we know, we would not hold it to sheet, and we'd just say, fine, we get rid of it. But there's two of the achronim from the last generation who said things that are negay to us, which is, and as you know, negay for us who worked in Kashrus. One is the Minchas Yitzchak, very good. The first is Minchas Yitzchak, who says that even though we don't hold like this sheet, he'll be mitzaref it if you have another tzadul kula, he'll be mitzaref this Maharit Tzahalon to other kulas, and which is very negay, because most people don't deal with Bishul Hakum. There are people who deal with Bishul Hakum on a private level, like a guy cooks for them, like in their house. But on more of the shilas of Bishul Hakum, at least from our perspective, is from factories, food being made in places where of course the Maharit Tzahalon would apply. So you have another tziruf, okay, and the most famous one that you'd be mitzaref would say that steam is not Bishul Hakum, so then you're off the hook. Okay? Then you're safe. That's one. But there's another shita. That I'll try to explain as I understand it, or the way I've been told what it is, which is for Moshe. Which is like this. Some people say that Moshe accepted the Maharit Tzahalon as is, at face value. That he held that there's no din of pas, of Bishul Akum, when it's by a Paltar. In a baker who's not doing it privately. However, that there are those who say that. Rebelsky said that Moshe told that.
No, I don't think they say by his own.
Okay.
Because according to Maharit Tzahalon, even if the Paltar is for 10 people, right, in a teeny little town,
okay,
right, it's considered Pas Paltar. Moshe would not say it, even according to those of non-letter.
Okay, so you're saying that
the only time because there's no relationship.
Good. Okay, you're making another version of Moshe. Another version. That's just fine. Another version of Moshe. Okay, so you heard another version. That Moshe said that maybe we don't hold the Maharit Tzahalon in a regular Paltar, like if you go to the bakery. If you go to North Shore Bakery, that's not considered a Paltar. But if you're buying it from Arnold's Bread, which is so far removed from you, it's like it's not just that it's for sale, so it's not personal, but it's like mamash far removed. The guys in the Philippines making the food for you, that there's no chash over there. So then, even there, everyone will. Then you could agree to Maharit Tzahalon. That's the version you want.
And you don't need any tzira from any.
No tzira, and you could just. And he was saying on that if you're buying food, so we don't say not bread. You're buying cooked squash from the Philippines. I don't think grow that there, but from the Philippines, it's going to be what because it's like so far removed to you, there's no shaykhs. Okay.
Yeah. What would be another tzira? I remember there's something, maybe fish or something with 3 tzira from 3 things. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know.
No. There's steam, and it was a factory, and there was a third thing. Oh, maybe it wasn't Eilav Shulchan Malachim.
Okay, fine.
Can.
Okay.
Was the third thing.
Now,
It wasn't Eilav Shulchan
Now,
Malachim.
Rebelsky said Moshe did not say that. Moshe told him what I'm about to tell you, and he did not say this thing that you could be samech on a factory cooking as a cooler. And the more interesting part, at least from my side, is that Rav Nata Greenblatt asked Rav Moshe about this question. Rav Moshe told him an answer, and Rav Nata then wrote down the question and the answer in Lashon Kodesh. He wrote down what Rav Moshe told him and showed it to Rav Moshe, and Rav Moshe approved it. Okay, and that was printed.
Maybe you mean Ephraim Greenblatt?
No.
You mean Ephraim? Are you sure
What do you
it was
mean?
Nata?
What?
Ephraim, there was Ephraim? He's the one that asked me the Kashrus.
Right, Ephraim was the one who was always with him.
Not the one that's the Kashrus.
Right.
Maybe I make a mistake. That's how I remember it. Maybe I make a mistake.
I mean, maybe I'm not asking because they got to Kashrus.
Right, so maybe I make a mistake. That's how I understand it. And this Shaila and Tshuva, which he wrote, Rabbi Greenblatt, whatever his first name was, wrote, and which Rav Moshe read over and approved, was printed, Rabbi Genak, in the first, the OU prints a journal called Masorah. Okay, and the journal is half is Masorah, meaning Torah from Rabbi Soloveitchik. That's the first half. And the second half is just some articles, many of them have to do with Kashrus. And in that first verse, the first volume of Masorah, Rabbi Genak printed a whole kuntrus on Bishul, and in it includes this Shaila and Tshuva from Rabbi Greenblatt and Rav Moshe together. Okay, and he says, and Rav Belsky said that's exactly what Rav Moshe told him, the same shita. Okay, so, which is as follows. He says, his question is, how come we don't hold like the Maharit Tzahalon? What's wrong with that? Why isn't Bishul of a Paltar mutter? Why isn't it true that if there's no chash of chasnas, I don't know the guy who makes Green Giant, I don't know anything about him, so why should the attacker be an issue of Bishul for those foods? To which Rav Moshe said, the answer is, which we would have said the same answer, which is, when Chazal, his way of saying it, is that when Chazal make an Isser, even though the reason doesn't apply, we say loy plug, they said Bishul Akum is also for this reason. Even if the reason doesn't apply, but the Isser applies anyhow. The Isser is to eat food cooked by a guy. The reason is because of this, but if the reason doesn't apply, too bad, loy plug, and in all cases it's also anyhow. So now, that's fine. That we would have all said of ourselves also. Now Rav Moshe added, and he said like this. We only say loy plug if the thing that the guy did is similar to the case where the Isser does apply. Meaning, in my house, I cooked up potatoes in a pot, and the guy in his factory cooked up potatoes in a pot. And maybe I used a small pot and a big pot, but basically he did the same thing that I did. But if the guy cooks up food in a way that's very different from what I do in my house, his method of cooking is nothing at all like what I do in my house, then that's not loy plug. Loy plug means he's basically doing the same act, but the act is done in a way without a chash of chasnas, then you say loy plug and it's awesome. But if he's doing like a different kind of an act, something that has nothing to do with like what I do in my house, then we don't say loy plug. Okay, which is a big chiddush. We don't say loy plug. So what he means is like this.
Why does it do with what you're doing in your house? Why not just what?
Well, no. I mean, what you do in a way that could cause chasnas. What would be done in a way that would cause a chash of chasnas? Meaning, my next door neighbor, the Oriental next door neighbor, would cook up a pot of potatoes and give it to me. That could lead to chasnas. So if the guy in the factory is doing something like that, he's doing the same actions, just not in a way that causes chasnas. So, if he cooks in a big pot than me, that's the same thing. That's included in the loy plug. It's assumed that even if he cooks in a kettle that's steam jacketed, in my house we cook in a pot that has a fire under it. In his pot, it's a little bit bigger. It also doesn't have a fire. It has steam. That's also the same kind of thing. Basically, you're cooking in a big pot of water. I'm cooking potatoes. He's cooking potatoes. It's the same thing. Okay? Even steam jacketed, but basically it's the same kind of a cooking. Where Moshe is assumed that he is being naked about is. What happens if I cook the food in a pot and he cooks the food in a retort? Okay, people don't have retorts in their houses.
I don't know what a retort is.
You don't, right? And the fact that you don't know what a retort means because it's hagufa is because could you wait a second? It's because
It's negated this. Just put on pause for a second.
the fact that you don't know, that you say is what's a retort is exactly the point. In your house, you don't have anything like that. When I say kettle, you say, I know what a kettle is. When I say retort, you say, what's a retort? That's exactly the point. Okay, a retort is a way of cooking food that's completely different from what you have in your house. A heat exchanger. I don't know if you know what that is. If you don't know, Haguf, that's the point, is that it's such a radically different way of cooking.
Also,
that's
it's different than steam kettle. All this steam cooking up water in a can.
Okay, I'm getting to that point. David, wait.
Not with lines and...
Okay, I'm getting right. Rega, wait, because I'm getting right to that point. Now the question is like this. Here's a shaila that came up, and it negates exactly what you said. Which is, the way you cook up potatoes to make potato flakes. Potato flakes are these like powdered potatoes that you add water to. The way you cook it is in this huge rectangular vessel, okay? And in there, you fill up the whole thing up with potatoes, and you put live steam to cook the potatoes. Okay? Ignore the fact whether live steam is or is not considered bishul akum. Okay? For this, then we're going to assume that is considered bishul. Okay? So the shayla is like this: it's being cooked basically in a big pot. So the tzad lahachmir is this thing is just a big pot. You can't apply what Moshe said to that case. It's just a big pot. I have a little pot. They have a big pot. My pot is round and their pot is square. Same thing. However, this pot has got a screw running through the middle of it. Okay? What's the screw for? Because the potatoes dump in on the left side, and then the screw turns very slowly, and it takes, let's say, 15 minutes for the screw pushes the potato across to the other side. So the screw is a way of getting the potatoes from the left side to the right side. When you get to the right side, they dump out the other side. Okay, so it's a convenience. It's an efficient way to get the potatoes to stay in for the right amount of time, and then they plop out the other side. So the question is like this. On the one hand, the cooking that's being done is basically just in a big rectangular pot. Okay? The screw has nothing to do with cooking. The screw is just a way to get the potatoes in and out. Okay? It's just a convenience, just a way to get that's what the screw is for. So on the one hand, the cooking is being done just like you do in your house. But on the other hand, so that was a tzad lahachmir. Okay? Then Rabbi Lubin suggested, and it was accepted, Rabbi Shechter liked this, was that if you look so carefully, if we look very carefully and say, oh no, over here, the cooking is being done in hot water, and the screw is just a convenience to get it across, then when you get to a retorte, you'll say, well, they're just cooking it with steam also. And it's more efficient to put the steam into a long tube, and to put the cans like this, and if you break everything down, there's no such thing that's different. Everything is the same. You use heat to make the food get cooked. That's all. Everything gets cooked like that. So if you look at it with a very carefully, and you say, in a heat exchanger, it's really fire that's cooking it. And it's convenient that instead of a fire touching the food, we put water. And then instead of water, we put a plate, because it's better than a pot. It's better to have plates. If you break it down to its little pieces, you'll always say that it's not that it's just a more convenient way to cook. So that was Rabbi Lubin's suggestion, which Rabbi Shechter liked, that you can't be so narrow-minded in deciding whether it is or is not edible, whether it is or is not a regular method of cooking. And when you look at something and say, oh my gosh, no one has anything like that in their house, and you look at this pot, it's a big, huge pot with a big screw running through it. There isn't anybody with a pot with a screw running through it, so you don't think of it like that, and therefore it's considered to be cooked in a radically different method, and it would qualify for what Moshe said. Now, even though I'm telling you all this, I have to tell you that the OU themselves, even though they got it, Ramosha told them, they're not samech on what Ramosha says. And I don't know others who are samech on. Ramosha said that if you cook it in a radically different way, but b'tziruf, another tzad l'hakol, they will be mekel, which is basically following what the Minchas Yitzchak said. Okay, the Minchas Yitzchak said he'd follow Maharit Tzahalon straight. Bishul of an akum, bishul in a factory, bishul of a paltar, B'tzir something else. So Rav Moshe is sort of even in a way being more machmir. Then, if you want to say I'll only follow Rav Moshe B'tzir of something else, then you're being sort of more machmir. So B'tzir of something else, then they would be making on that.
What about b'diavad?
What about b'diavad? That's a good question.
B'diavad, and you don't have a tziruf.
It
happens all the time. It happened here also.
If it's a matter of losing the account, you can be making.
Do you have anything like a recall with the evidence?
It happened already.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. So what would you say? Should we be selling for Rav Moshe?
We know the answer.
Rav Moshe's case, but it's a very specific case. Most of the cooking that goes on in factories doesn't qualify for Rav Moshe. Most of the cooking is just in a big pot.
According to Belsky's information.
Yeah, you missed that part.
Okay.
So if you...
It's clever.
No.
Rush is true in the full.
Minchas Yitzchak said
Right, he says
he would rely at b'tziruf. Right. According to the Minchas Yitzchak.
Yeah.
B'diavad.
I don't know. He doesn't seem very thrilled. There's only 5 lines. I have the part of the truth here if you want it. There's not much to it. He's not very thrilled.
I can tell you what happened, and we asked Rabbi Schwartz. I forgot exactly what the case was. No tziruf, b'diavad, and it was okay.
So, based on this?
Based on,
Based on that,
No, that's not the Maharit
Maharit
Tzahalon.
Tzahalon.
The cooler.
Okay, I'm surprised to hear it. I'm saying most people would not do that, even in the case of the Yemen.
That was
In Ramoshe's,
before your time.
in Ramoshe's side is more, sort of a little bit more mainstream. Even that, the people are not makabel. That's more, in the but it's a big kiddush. I mean, people are not accepting because it's a big kiddush. It's one thing to say loy plug, but say when loy plug only applies to certain cases, you're like sort
You
of
also
seeing the
take a
purpose.
Ramoshe and reanalyzing. It's not called what Ramoshe would say is din.
What do you
We
mean?
have to say at the same time that this machine qualifies as Ramoshe's din. Ramoshe never said which machine, which system does and which system doesn't.
Well,
We are
it's
saying-
interesting. It's interesting because the case that he said, you probably would guess does not qualify. The case that he was talking about was that they squirted eggs into molds, and then the molds went over, I think, over steam, and then they popped the eggs out of the molds. They cooked the eggs in a mold. If I got it correctly, I have it. I don't have it here. I think they squirted eggs
Maybe
liquid
the
into
Ramoshe
molds.
steam is the whole musik of steam.
That's not what the shai was about. The shai wasn't because of the steam shai.
No, but Ramoshe held that steam is not
Cooking something with live steam is already a radically,
Right,
very
it's
different.
different.
I'm going to check in if it says steam in there. Okay, maybe that's what it means. But if you would have heard the case, put the steam inside for a second, you would say, so the eggs in the mold, big deal. So he has it in the mold. My kids also cook eggs in molds, or in a little thing. But
By the way,
okay, so,
Ramoshe had this true right about the Passport and the companies, right? Even if it's Yisroel, right?
yes.
Right. So you see, Clara Moshe did not say over there. Oh, well, it's a company, so it wasn't a geya. It's Passport.
So you're saying-
not like the first mouth.
Not like some people say.
Right,
That's good.
And also in the last cheder, the English,
Yeah.
Moshe last cheder supposed also said before.
Okay, I'm saying, and we've talked about. Okay, fine. Let's start.